They cut my oxygen line like trimming a hedge like a petty ribbon at a garden club. And I remember telling the 911 operator my voice then, she cut my oxygen line, I have her on camera. Then that terrible pause where someone decides if you're a prank or a panic, but it wasn't a joke. A week earlier, I'd come home from the hospital feeling like a ghost with a pulse. Maria pushing me through the door with a portable oxygen unit trailing behind like a loyal dog, simple tubing, discreet tanks, a little machine humming beside the couch, survival disguised as furniture. After 3 days intubated, you don't argue aesthetics, you argue for breath. Karen Wendell was the HOA's self-appointed sheriff. Permanent squint lips, always pursed, the type who calls city services over a backyard fire pit. And the moment she saw our setup, she taped a note to our front window. Medical equipment visible from the street violates HOA Code 4.3b. Please relocate. I should have ripped it down, but recovery makes you patient and brittle at once, so I nudged the tank behind the drapes and hoped she would move on. She didn't. She hovered, literally walking her dog by our house 8 times a day, pretending to tie a shoe, squinting at our blinds as if waiting for a confession. Maria started parking the car to block her view. We laughed, called her the squinter. But jokes don't fix the feeling that someone's measuring the air you draw. The night it happened, I woke up gasping, like drowning on dry land. My hands hunted for my nose cannula. There was no airflow. I crawled across the rug, found the machine saw, a clean, precise scissor cut. Not snapped, not chewed. A calculated incision. My phone pulled up the security feed, and there she was at 2:12 a.m., slipping in with what looked like a key, bending over my machine, cutting the line, smiling at the camera like she'd just done community service, then walking out. Maria raced home from the ER, mid-shift fury written in scrubs, and Officer Delgado watched the footage with a face that suggested he'd seen most things, but had never seen someone smile like that in the middle of a crime. Karen showed up the next morning, robe and dog, all innocence and parade wave, explaining that she was restoring harmony. Maria got close enough to make her stumble into a lilac bush confrontation, yes, but not violence, and we filed a formal report. Then Ms. Pearl knocked at our door, 80 sharp, famous for lemon bars and zero patience for HOA nonsense, carrying a mug of tea and a flash drive, and she said with a smirk, "I've been running my own neighborhood watch." She plugged the drive in, and we heard Karen on her own audio, "Maybe this will teach him not to make the neighborhood look like a hospital." She said clean as a bell. Premeditation had a voice. Evidence moved faster than expectations. Officer Delgado took copies. A few HOA members resigned overnight, and Karen posted on the HOA page about false information. Pearl replied with a barb about scissors being gardening tools. The post vanished within minutes, and the neighborhood felt a little less afraid and a bit more awake. We hired Paul Cartwright, who smelled like old legal pads and certainty, and he took the footage to Judge Holbrook, who didn't much care for the "I was preserving standards" line. The legal dominoes tumbled. The insurer canceled coverage for the board after Karen admitted unauthorized entry, and a background check turned up a past fraud conviction under another name she had tried to hide. Restraining orders and suspension of HOA authority followed, but the larger shift came from folks we never expected, neighbors who had been bullied into silence. Collecting evidence turned into a communal purge, screenshots of petty fines, voicemails, stories of threats over mailbox paint and Halloween decorations, and a petition to decertify the HOA gained steam, signed by a father down the block who'd been threatened over his kid's trampoline. Within a day, 70% had signed. The neighborhood moved from simmer to full boil. Pearl staged a neighborhood projection one night. Mini projectors on garage doors played the break-in footage on loop audio, echoing down the street. People brought popcorn. A teenager blasted the Imperial March while Karen stormed out in a bathrobe and tripped into her hydrangeas, humiliating, yes, but also a communal catharsis after years of feeling powerless. The twist was uglier than we'd thought. A deep dive into her past revealed no planning firm, no certifications, and a fraud conviction from another state. Auditors found HOA funds funneled to mysterious beautification projects and receipts for upscale meals, and then the federal angle-enhanced footage showed her rifling through our mail and pocketing a padded envelope, my prescription medication. That put federal agents at the door, and Delgado returned with a warrant. They found packing boxes and paperwork that proved she had lied on HOA applications. The look on her face when they slapped cuffs on her was a mix of shock and the realization that the rules she used to enforce were actually being enforced on her. In court, she tried to play martyr, claiming concern for aesthetics. Maria testified with quiet clinical fury about watching me claw the carpet for breath and the cruelty of someone prioritizing curb appeal over a man's life. The jury didn't need much persuasion. Her sentence, a mix of penalties and a sting of poetic justice, probation, monitored house arrest fines, community service working with patients who rely on medical gear, and the HOA was dissolved. Miss Pearl was voted chair of a new residence council that operated openly. No secret fines, no weird penalties. She sent out a flyer. In this neighborhood, your oxygen is your business. Welcome back to sanity. Recovery is strange. It softens you and hardens you at once. After being intubated, small things feel enormous and large things feel distant, and confrontation costs more than it used to because breathing takes priority. Maria moved through that time like a lighthouse. Steady, efficient, protective cataloging meds, checking seals, rerouting tubing with hands that knew their work and eyes that knew the stakes. Watching Karen on the footage over and over, I stopped feeling like a victim and started cataloging a pattern, the casual way she ignored the camera, the practiced calm in her movements, the way she seemed to enjoy the inspection. We pulled together the scraps, the taped note on our window neighbor's whispered complaints, screenshots of petty fines she'd issued, and it became clear she hadn't stumbled into enforcement by accident. This was a system she'd built. Paul, our lawyer, kept telling us to let the paper trail. Breathe, timelines, timestamps, witness statements, and so Maria and I did the tedious thing. We made lists. We talked to neighbors who had been fined for paint colors or holiday decorations. We saved voicemails where Karen's tone flexed from officious to menacing, and we turned neighborhood gripes into evidence. It was slow work and sometimes boring, but it made the picture visible. Pearl's projection night was a strange mix of theater and justice. Pods of light played across garage doors and stoops while people stood in their driveways, some laughing, some crying, some clapping. The footage looped and the audio, her line about the neighborhood looking like a hospital, hung in the air like a bad perfume. For people who'd acquiesced to her notes for years, it was a release. For others, it was a reckoning. The petty cruelty they'd accepted for the illusion of order wasn't order at all. When the case stepped into federal territory, the enhanced footage showing her rifling through our mail and pocketing a prescription, everything changed. Federal agents aren't interested in HOA politics. They're interested in statutes and controlled substances. The tone shifted from neighborhood quarrel to legal consequence, and that gravity focused attention in a way our petitions hadn't. Courtroom testimony is a strange thing, arrested and ordinary. Maria took the stand and told the story without flourish, the way a nurse tells a family the facts, the way a partner relays a memory. Her voice was quiet, precise, and it landed harder because it wasn't performative. The prosecution mapped the timeline, the defense flailed with civic vocabulary, and the jury listened to the ordinary details that reveal intent. The HOA's dissolution felt like civic recovery. It wasn't spectacle. It was people choosing to replace a system of secret rules with transparent, volunteer-led governance. Miss Pearl improbably became a civic leader. The new council posted minutes, held public meetings, and refused to hide fines in the margins. The old ledger that had paid for nebulous beautification projects turned into audit trails and subpoenas, and the small-town tyranny began to dissolve into ordinary neighborliness. There was a bittersweet satisfaction in the judge's sentence, punitive but oddly corrective, and in the way the community organized to make sure such a thing couldn't happen again. But the real victory was quieter, being able to sit on my porch and watch children play, knowing that my oxygen machine was visible and unthreatened, a normal domestic sound again. It was ordinary dignity reclaimed, and that felt like more than revenge. It didn't fix everything. It didn't erase the nights my chest tightened at odd hours, or the times I'd wake and check the tubing by reflex. Trauma has echoes. But it did change the air outside our window, the one that Karen had tried to police and that mattered. It made the hum of my machine, once a thing to hide, into a normal household sound again, and there is a dignity in ordinary things. The lesson wasn't a tidy sermon. It was this unchecked authority, even when wrapped in neighborhood aesthetics and standards, can metastasize into cruelty. And cruelty looks a lot like care, when the person doing it convinces themselves they're right. Power without oversight breeds petty tyrants, and small aggressions allowed to fester become dangerous. We reclaimed ordinary dignity, and that felt like victory. Still, as I watched neighbors dance and kids chase fireflies, one question kept nagging me: how many small cruelties do we ignore until they become crimes? And who gets to decide which inconveniences justify tampering with someone's life support? Was Karen an inevitable correction or a warning we should have seen sooner? Tell me, did we do the right thing, or did justice go too far? Share your story in the comments, and let's talk about where the line should be drawn.